What's going on, everyone? My name's Tenebris Infinite, and a big part of the reason why I enjoy games like Generation Zero and Road to Vostok is their setting, being based off of real-world locations and excellent Scandinavian landscapes. But the other main reason is the opportunity to see weapons in video games that are often not represented enough. Prime examples being the AG4 and 5 in Generation Zero from Carl Gustav, based on the real-life AK4 and 5. Or in RTV, the SA-85, based on the S-85 by Sako, and the RK-62, based on the real-life gun from Valmet. The opportunity to see these lesser represented weapons creates a certain variety to these games from your typical FPS experience. Though nowadays we see much more variety in first-person shooters, you can't get away from some of the stereotypical small arms that you use in these games. Today, we're going to look at Sako and see how there are opportunities to have Sako rifles be a constant throughout the entire game, having options for the very early game, mid-game, and even the far late game when you're cruising through Vostok. Keeping that variety and homegrown arsenal to the game will create the experience to set Road to Vostok apart, outside of its hardcore gameplay. So, if you happen to enjoy the ideas I'm putting out here, or are just a fan of Sakos like me, then hit the thumbs up button to show your support, or post a comment with maybe a rifle I've left out, or your own personal hopes for guns in Road to Vostok. So let's start by looking at the early game, when you have little to your name than an old rifle and a backpack, and you're just looking to make it by to the next day in Area 5. In this stage of the game, it'd be cool to see weapons in very light calibers, and then as we progress east towards Vostok, the calibers and guns themselves all increase. It could turn out different than that, but we'll work under this assumption and start off with some varmint rifles for bandit sniping. Bandits were shown off in the recent work in progress video, and presuming there'll be enemies in the game, they likely will not be heavily armored like the border guards or the Russians. So, in this early stage of the game, using a weapon chambered in 22 long rifle is really not too far of a cry off of what probably would happen in a real-life RTV scenario. You wouldn't have any high-end guns to use, just whatever you can get your hands on. So let's introduce the Sako Quad series, or, in order to avoid any copyright issues, the SQ. From top to bottom we have the Finfire range, the heavy barrel in the middle, and the base quad in the bottom. Sporting really sleek designs, it's almost a shame rifles like these would be just for the early game. But chambered in 22 long rifle, they'd have enough force to put down a bandit in maybe 2 or 3 shots, but would have little to zero kick and have surplus ammunition in the early game. You could have an ascending rarity, so the Finfire being the rarest and the basic range being the easiest to find, providing a good amount of variety in Sakos for the early game when you have just 1 or 2 shelters to work with. These Sakos would help us get further into Area 5 and allow us to get to a more mid-game level for our character. Mid-game, we could see the SA-85 we already have, plus a good number of variants and a couple other options in the form of higher caliber hunting rifles. All of these are chambered differently, so we'll go through those as we go along here, but they all bump the power up by quite a margin. We have 2 85s on top and a 75 on the bottom. Just fantastically crafted guns. The top is the long range, and this gun is chambered in 300 Winchester. The carbine in the middle is pretty dang cool too though, with its full-length stock in 22-250. And the 75 is really interesting, offering a ton of different caliber options for a more artisan-styled rifle. And lastly, the S20. This classy as heck rifle is a new one from Sako, but as far as we know, RTV is set in the modern day, so who's to say that we couldn't see this beaut as an extremely rare drop? Similar to the 75, it's chambered in a bunch of different rounds, so it's kinda up to the dev firstly whether he'd like to include these options, and then also what caliber he'd like them to be in for the game. And then the late game, what I've got my eyes on here from the very get-go. The high-powered late-game options for Sako could be awesome introductions into RTV, offering insane power, rare ammo, and so many style points you'd pretty much only ever want to use these rifles. I'm talking about the TRG series of Sako. All of these are chambered for 338 Lapua except for the Snow Camo Jubilee. That one's in 308, so it'd be a fancier option for an ammo type you'd likely have a ton of stock for. But these are just modern monsters from Sako. More mil-spec'd than for hunting, all of these would be awesome to work towards. These could be final endgame weapons, something with less than a 1% drop rate kind of gun, but would be an awesome option overall for sniping, or more likely something we'll hang up in our shelter and never use in fear of losing it. The whole TRG series is sick, and seeing them in Road to Vostok would be really cool for the endgame as something to work towards, upgrading our Sakos along the way until they are the beastly mil-spec guns that Sako produces today. So, let me know, would you like to use these Sakos in RTV's future? I could see us having shelters with huge collections of excellent looking Sako and Velvet styled guns, and the gun walls and racks we could set up with these modern and laminate wood guns would be so frickin' cool. But for now, thank you for watching. Maybe consider subscribing for more RTV content, but for now, I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace.